Turn it over to our executive director, Hannah Conn.
Thanks, Melissa. Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining us this afternoon. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Hannah Conover. I serve as the Executive Director of Grant Ready Kentucky. Our nonprofit organization serves statewide, providing support to make sure that Kentucky communities are aware of opportunities like the one we're going to be talking about today, and to make sure that we're ready and submitting applications that are as competitive as possible to these opportunities. Before we dive into content, I do want to review a few quick housekeeping items. For any of you who couldn't join us live today or who might be juggling eating lunch and trying to listen with one ear, this webinar is being recorded, and we will be emailing a copy of the recording, the slides, to all registered attendees later this week. And then we'll also be posting it as a resource on our website at grantreadyky.org. We also have a number of wonderful guest speakers today and a whole lot of expert content to cover. So we're going to ask that you put your questions in the chat, and then we're going to reserve some time at the end to make sure we get those answered for you. And if you've learned about this webinar from somewhere other than the Grant Ready Kentucky newsletter, I would encourage you to join our newsletter. Eleanor will throw a link to that in the chat. And that'll make sure that you stay up to date on opportunities like this one and other free trainings and resources that we offer. So today we are excited to walk through two federal grant opportunities that are now open from the Economic Development Administration. And both of these opportunities fall under a single umbrella. So we have Public Works and Economic Adjustment Assistance. And then within economic adjustment assistance is a special pathway called the Assistance to Coal Communities. And that pathway now has significant funding that's open now on a rolling basis for economic development projects in regions that have been negatively impacted by a decline or a change in the coal economy. So before I introduce our panel of expert speakers, I do want to emphasize this is a statewide opportunity. It's not just limited to Eastern or Western Kentucky. And when we look at the number of coal mine closures or coal-fired power plant closures across the state, 15 years is the time frame that the EDA uses to assess that. We've found that Kentucky is really strongly positioned and eligible for this funding stream. So I want to remind everyone of that just because it says coal communities, don't discount it immediately. You may be impacted and just need to look at the data. I also want to remind everyone that EDA grants are eligible for cash match assistance from Kentucky's Grant Match Program. So we've brought together a great team of folks who understand the eligibility of this opportunity, how to assemble regional partnerships, and how to obtain those match dollars that you might need to be competitive. So we're joined today by Kentucky's dedicated EDA rep, Emily Hathcock. Thank you for joining us, Emily. Also joined by Kentucky Senate President Robert Stivers and experts from the Kentucky Cabinet for Economic Development. And that includes Deputy Commissioner Kylie Palmer. Thanks for joining, Kylie. Director of Program Administration, Joseph Giron, and also Lizzie Coffey. Thank you for helping us organize. So we're very grateful to have President Stivers join us today and for his leadership in the General Assembly, which this past spring extended the program deadline for the grant match program that many folks will use to access this EDA opportunity, and added more funding to that grant match pool. And we're also very grateful for Secretary Jeff Knoll's leadership at the Cabinet for Economic Development and that the team here who administers that match program. It's a really big deal and has now supported more than 400 projects across the Commonwealth. This EDA opportunity does require documented regional partnerships. So it's very important that we think bigger on this than just one county. And to that end, I'd like to turn the floor over first to President Stivers, if he'd like to say a few words about regional partnerships and the importance of those, and then to Deputy Commissioner Palmer.
I think, Hannah, that I'm unmuted.
You are. We can hear you. Thank you, sir.
Okay. There's probably a lot of people in this world that wish I weren't. But First of all, thank you for putting this together and all the other individuals involved. Let me say this about the cabinet. I think it's well documented about the relationships among some people between the executive branch and the legislative branch, but I want to compliment Secretary Noel and their group. From the legislature standpoint, they're one of the really good cabinets to work with, and we appreciate all they've done. Um, Something that coming from the East, and I know this is not just the East, but we've been the most adversely impacted by the change in policies as it relates to use of carbon-based fuels. And I don't want to argue global warming or decarbonization. What I want to argue is if you're going to change that type of direction that's going to impact so many people, think about the after effects. And now I think the federal government is actually starting to think about the after effects and how to restore jobs back to those places that were so adversely affected. The other thing about much of the discussion I've been talking about with my district and counties outside of my district, and all the way to the far east, we need to think in a type of strategic way on collaboration, cooperation, multi-state app or multi-county, multi-city types of applications. Because as we look at it as a legislature, when you come with, and I'll give an example, Scott, Fayette, and Madison with a joint request to say we want to put together a regional industrial park, that has a very strong showing. Why? One, it's three counties. The other part of that is that if you locate something there with the transient population that we have, um, people are going to work in Madison County and live in Fayette or vice versa, or how many people drive to Scott County to work at Toyota. So thinking of regional aspects of locating something in Hazard or Whitesburg or Bell County, Middlesboro, take your choice, putting multiple counties together, they're going to employ people across the county lines from that position that they are physically located. So when these types of opportunities come together, the other part that I think is critical about this is how you can take a dollar at the local level and understanding exactly how it could be applied to capital stack or leverage that into much larger amounts on a regional basis. And I think that's where this discussion today comes in very valuable.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for those comments, President Stivers. And my family's from Bell County, so I love the shout out on Bell County too. So yeah, we definitely want to lift up all the regions of the state. Now I'd like to turn it over to Kylie Palmer to say a few words from the cabinet's perspective. Kylie?
Hi, yes, thank you. Good afternoon. Appreciate the opportunity to join you all today. When the grant program came to our cabinet, it was an exciting opportunity, and every chance we get to talk about the program and the impact that it's having is a benefit to everyone. I love hearing the opportunity to get federal funds in Kentucky. So that's been a true charge from the very beginning. So we just appreciate the time to join you guys today and hear about this. Emily, thank you for taking time to visit with us. We really appreciate it.
Thank you, Kylie, so much. Melissa, I think we're good to start sharing some slides now. And I will turn this show over to you. Melissa Vermillion is our Chief Strategy Officer and leads our education pillar here at Grant Ready Kentucky. She has a lot of experience in EDA grants and winning them competitively for Kentucky regions. And Emily Hathcock, as I mentioned, is our dedicated Kentucky EDA rep. And if you don't know her from her former life and great work at Barren River Area Development District, then allow me to introduce you to her today as your new EDA rep. So thank you both, and I'll turn it over for your expert guidance. You're muted, Melissa.
Just a little bit about Grant Ready Kentucky. We were formed several years ago in response to the need for across the state of Kentucky to be able to take advantage of and be competitive for and be able to have the capacity to pursue and receive and manage and do great work with federal funds. Now, there's more than federal funds, but we know that there's a lot of big dollars in federal funds. And so we stand ready to help organizations remove the barriers that may stop them from being able to access those funds. So we do a variety of things. We do trainings. We offer webinars just like this, but we also have some other trainings. I know Eleanor will be dropping some links in the chat along the way to kind of connect you to a variety of things that we offer. But we can also offer one-on-one and individualized coaching. Let's say that you need to find out what you want to do with this EDA grant. Maybe you've got a really strong project and you want to dig deeper and see whether or not, the EDA grant is the right funding source for your project that you're working on. We can help with that. Maybe you're interested in other types of funding besides this EDA opportunity. We can help you do some prospecting. And then we can do some other things around all of that. We can help you kind of maneuver the grant program and filling out some of that paperwork and seeing exactly how to calculate that local match. And then ultimately, if you don't have a grant writer on staff, we have a very deep bench of grant professionals that can come alongside you and help you actually write that grant or edit and review that grant and help you get it over the finish line. So we're very proud of that work. So I'm not going to read all of this, but again, Hannah's already mentioned that we have Emily with us. Emily was such a win for the EDA to be able to come over from Brad to be able to be our statewide rep. And I've been working with her a lot recently, and she is extremely responsive. And so throwing you under the bus, Emily, I know she will listen to you and talk to you and kind of see whether or not you want anything, if you've got a project that you want to kind of vet through there. So this is just a little bit of what we're going to be covering. We are specifically going to be talking about the EDA Public Works and Economic Adjustment Assistance Grant. And we're going to be covering what's under that and what kind of match is involved and how the grant program can help all of that. And so, and again, a few folks have put in the slides, are you getting the slides and the recording and 100% you will. Okay, we have a little poll here that Eleanor is going to deploy. And if you could go ahead and click on that, that would be great. So just a couple of questions here. It helps us and the EDA and the cabinet understand who you guys are and who's actually accessing these funds. And after we give a couple of seconds here for folks to complete the poll, we'll go ahead and share those results. So please take some time and complete that. I see some folks are starting to populate it. So we really want to know right here is, what county are you located in? And are you coal impacted? Now, Hannah just mentioned earlier that regardless if you're coal impacted or not, this is a statewide opportunity. So, but there is a special piece underneath the grant program that does allow for coal impacted communities. So we just want to get a feel for who is coal impacted and who is not. Like most everyone has answered. So Eleanor, if you want to show those results on screen. Okay, so the opportunity at a glance, we're talking about the this particular opportunity, the 11.300 and the 11.307. Lots of times those of you that write grants, you are always looking for that opportunity number. And so here it is. There are going to be two different core programs with only one application. A unique thing about this particular grant is that there's not a deadline. It operates on a rolling basis, basically until the funding is gone. Now, what that means, though, is that time is of the essence. for you to be able to apply and put in a strong application, because every day they're reviewing applications and they're allocating funds. So time is of the essence. And another thing to note about this opportunity is that depending upon where you live and the level of distress of your community, your match will change. So it could be as low as 20%, it could be as high as 40%. And it could be even an average if you've got some counties that you're serving that are distressed and some counties that are not distressed. Now we have to kind of create an advocate or an aggregate. So we want to go ahead and not assume it's just 60% or it's just it's just 80%. We need to look and see all the counties that you're going to be serving under your project. Someone is asking how a coal impacted county is defined. Within the solicitation, there are some very particular guidelines and there's some very particular resources that they will direct you to. But then it's also an opportunity for you to make a case. So something may have happened in your community where the energy industry has changed or altered in some way, and you can make a case for that to show how the community has been impacted. And I know that Emily will talk more about that. Okay, so again, Hannah also mentioned this, that there are a lot of areas within Kentucky that actually apply as coal impacted. And so it kind of uniquely positions Kentucky to be competitive. And so if you have not looked at this opportunity, you need to look at it closely. Maybe you looked at it before and you were kind of on the fence. Here is an opportunity to really look deeply. And if you are in that coal impacted community, you have about $80 million out of all of the funding that's been kind of set aside for that. And, we need to get the word out. We need to make sure that all of our Kentucky communities that can apply are applying.
All right, I will jump in now.
Yes, please.
Yeah, thank you so much for all of the kind words. I'm excited to be here. I'm excited to be the Kentucky rep. For anybody that hasn't worked with me yet, I am in Kentucky. I'm based out of Bowling Green. I serve the entire state. I am happy to talk about projects and project development as you are learning more about these opportunities and as you kind of get ideas for what you might want to do in your own communities. So we'll take a few minutes and dive a little bit deeper into both of these programs. And the first one is Public Works. This is probably what you're most familiar with EDA. It's our construction mainly projects. It does things that help distressed communities build, design, engineer physical infrastructure. These, I will ask you, just keep in mind, we are the Economic Development Administration. So we are focused on economic development. So we want to see how whatever project you come in does tie back to those jobs or private investment and how that's going to bolster your community. So some examples that you would see in the Public Works program would be water and sewer improvements, industrial parks, harbors, brownfield redevelopment. We can also do broadband and fiber. We can do workforce development facilities and manufacturing space as well. So my boss likes to joke and say these are roads to commodes. But those are our kind of basic ones. Those are our bread and butter projects that we do. Lots and lots of water and sewer, but we're doing more and more every day. So our other program is our Economic Adjustment Assistance. This one truly is our most flexible program. We can do construction and non-construction. We can do things like planning grants out of this one. We can do implementation things. Planning has to go around developing or updating parts that are with your comprehensive economic development strategy, or feasibility studies can fall into that as well. Your comprehensive economic development strategy is maintained by your area development district for whatever region that you're in. There is one for every county, every community in the state. And when you submit your applications to EDA, we do ask that you reference where your project fits within that plan. So please be in contact with your ad to make sure that it is in there in some way. Implementation grants are things that help you carry out whatever is in that plan as well. I will give you a heads up. All of those comprehensive and economic development strategies are due for rewrites starting next year. So now is a really great time to contact your ad and tell them you have a specific project you would like to see referenced in those plans. They can also update throughout, but now's just kind of perfect opportunity. Implementation grants will also help to capitalize revolving loan funds if that is something that you're interested in. Looking at the next one. So inside our economic assistance pathway are three special need pathways. The one we're going to focus on today is the assistance to coal communities, but there's also a nuclear closure communities and a biomass closure communities. Our assistance to coal communities is, like I said, most relevant to ED or to Kentucky, and it runs on our most flexible plan, which is really nice. And as Melissa mentioned earlier, we have about 80 million grant funds available in this pot of applications.
So we have another poll to take. Let's see if we can, I think that we were seeing the results on screen and I was not clear about that earlier, so I apologize for that. So Eleanor, if you want to go ahead and share poll 2. What we are interested here is what sector would your project support? So what sector? So if you would scroll down through there and choose what sector. Of course, we've got a lot of economic and community and economic development looks like it's coming in, but then also education and workforce, health and human services, housing, tourism, public safety. Looks like everything is being covered. We don't have anybody in there yet from agriculture or environment. But every other sector, someone is responding and clicking on something. So we'll just give that a couple more minutes because folks are still voting. It's the poll. Let's see what the results are. In community and economic development, which is exactly what we would expect. But a lot that are in education and workforce, so we know that the workforce and the education of those people greatly impacts economic development. So I really appreciate that.
All right, talking about how do you qualify for this funding now? So with any of our standard programs, you can qualify for a higher rate of match through a special need. And to document that special need, we'll either need standardly 24-month unemployment rate, which is above the national average, or a per capita income that is 80% or less of the national average. But with the assistance to coal communities, you could go the other route, which is if you have had a coal impacting event in the last 15 years, which is closure of a coal mine, a coal fire powered plant, or a coal economy supply chain that has all happened sometime within the last 15 years, and you can document that, then you can apply for that higher match rate, lower match rate for your higher grant rate. I will take a note here and just say we have some communities that we know have had events, but that is not a pass fail on if you automatically qualify for this funding or not. You still have to make the case on how that event impacted your community and how your community project that you're applying for is going to respond to that. If you're in a community that we don't have a baseline, like yes, no, we can see there's an event here, you can still make that case for how this coal impacts have been seen in your area. So for example, one of the very first, or actually the very first coal grant that was made out of the Atlanta EDA region went to Florida, which you're thinking, why Florida, right? And it's because CSX is based out of there, and they documented that they were laying off a significant number of their workforce due to the reduction in coal logistic moving. So again, you don't have to be on the yes, no to be able to make the case to show that the coal has impacted your community and apply for these funds.
So I have a question, Emily, about the standard route. So there could be folks on the call that say, hey, I don't live in a coal impacted area. Is, because we already said, yes, the grant's for you, but maybe they're thinking, I don't see ourselves in this. Can you spend a little bit more talking about if they're not in coal impacted, how they still have a very strong competitive opportunity?
Absolutely. So if you're not in coal, but you can still show that you have a 24-month unemployment rate that's above the national average, or a per capita income that's 80% or less of the national average, you can document or you can apply for a reduced match amount at the same level as if you were with coal. So again, that could be up to 80% grant, which is really nice. And a lot of times also EDA is probably not going to be your only federal funder. You're going to have us in with a mix of other funding partners. So I don't want you to get the idea that we're a sole source. We're typically not, but
For sure. Thank you for that.
yeah. And so the Coal Assistance to Coal Communities grant can fund a wide variety of things, just like our other two programs, because it fits within them. So it can do construction, it can do workforce development, it can do planning, technical assistance. It can also do a loan fund, and it can support your anything that'll help to create or retain jobs, so long as you make that case in your application.
Question about planning. So help us understand planning a little bit more. So let's say that you have an initiative, you have a project, maybe you need to do some feasibility work, maybe you need to do some more investigation as to whether or not the economy and the community can support your idea. Is it my understanding, could you apply for planning to do that early legwork? And isn't it kind of more competitive and stronger if you go into an implementation grant with that type of planning report or feasibility study or whatever you want to call that?
Yes to both. So yes, you can apply for funding to have that feasibility study conducted. And then once that comes back and it says, yes, this looks like a very viable project for your area, and you include that in your implementation application to us, that helps as well. So yes to both. All right. So
Yeah,
this
go
goes
ahead.
back to we're typically not going to be your only funder. So how are our ranges? What do we look like? Our public works averages around 600,000 to 5 million. I would say the sweet spot in there is about 2 to 3 million. Economic adjustment assistance is 150,000 to 2.5 million. That 650,000 is about the sweet spot there as well. Coal communities is 500,000 to 3 million. We've seen them range in that, and I think you're pretty good on that one for asking what you need. And then planning projects, though, 100,000 to 350,000. I wouldn't go any higher than 350,000 with that application. But I also want to clarify, you look at this and you go, oh, my project for economic assistance is going to be 3 million. I'm not going to apply because I won't get it. Don't do that. Um, Call me. Let's walk through it. Don't view this as a hard cutoff. Because we can help kind of look at all of the pieces of that and see. And it's not going to be well, if you send it to me and it's 2.5 million and $1, I'm going to kick it out like that. It doesn't work that way. So just to ease a little bit of fears there.
Example of some projects that were recently funded, just to give folks an idea and let them see themselves in these projects. Notice that it doesn't have to be a huge project. Notice here that Apple Shop back in 2022, they got $62,000 for a feasibility study. Then look at the city of Earlton for water and sewer infrastructure, 610. And then all the way down to the city of Richmond, they got a large grant, what I would consider to be large, of 4.7 million for the renovation of a former school. So please think about, don't say, oh, well, this is too big or it's too small. Really take a look at your project and know that EDA may be able to fit in where you need it to Because not everyone is ready to break ground on something. Sometimes we need to do a little homework. And, you know, Emily, it's so rare to find funding opportunities that can help you with that early homework. And so I appreciate that.
All right, talking about your match, we've covered a lot on kind of how you can document that higher match or lower match amount for you. The other things to keep in mind, though, specifically, if you are looking for a construction project, we require your match to be cash match, not in kind. So if you are doing a construction, it has to be cash match. And that's because of the way that EDA's reimbursements work. We are a reimbursement grant, which means you're going to pay the check first, show us that you've paid it. We will submit the reimbursement at whatever your grant rate is. So you'll get reimbursed 80% of what you spent based upon if you got the 80% rate there. So just a note for that. Planning it can be a little bit different. We have some flexibility with in-kind, but the in-kind has to be something that would be eligible to be paid for with the grant and can't be a third thing over here. So we get a lot with, can we donate land and the land be our in-kind? It cannot. That's not part of our acceptable in kinds, unfortunately. And I can meet one-on-one and go a lot deeper if anybody has questions on in kind. And I also have our legal on standby. I can always ask them and they can clarify. So just a couple of notes there.
We have Joseph Giron with the Cabinet for Economic Development, and he's going to speak to us a little bit about the grant match program and how it can support this EDA opportunity and some changes that have taken place. So you'll need to know about a few changes.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Joseph Giron, and I do work with the Cabinet for Economic Development, and I work on the grant program. The grant program is an exciting program to help cover some of the local match required for eligible applicants to eligible federal grants. Excitingly, EDA is an eligible federal grant, and it also has that required match portion that we just talked about. So that's where the grant program can come into play. The grant program accepts applications monthly. They're due the first of each month. That website link right there will take you to our website that has the application, has a little bit of the documentation surrounding what you might need for the application, along with some previous examples of approved projects, so that you might be able to look through, see some other examples of EDA projects that have been approved through the grant program, and see how that might line up with some of your own potential projects as you apply to the EDA for these federal grants. Melissa mentioned some changes in the most recent legislative session. So if you are familiar with the grant program as of a couple of years ago, some key differences that have come out of this session. We have a few more federal grant eligibilities. EDA is still a part of that bracket, so no worries about that. We have an additional $100 million allocated to the program, broken up across 2 fiscal years. So July 1, we got the first $50 million allocation to the grant program. We're still taking applications. We're working through the ones on the August meeting right now. The next eligible application timeline would be September 1st for our September meeting review. Additionally, keep in mind that that process takes the whole month. So we'll let you know at the end of that month on whether or not you received the grant program award. One key change here is the local match requirement. I'm going to try not to use too many of the same words that EDA will also use to describe their match process, but when applying for funds from the grant program to help cover that local match that EDA is requesting of you, there's a small percentage of funds that you need to match to the grant program's funds. That's based off of county population. It's averaged out. There are 5 different tiers. That map is also available on our website to help figure out what that's going to look like for you, but also our application calculates out that for you. That breakdown is between 2 and 10%, averaging out on regionals, never to exceed that 10%. A bigger change here that matters a lot when it comes to the EDA sort of rolling application cycle process is that applications to the grant program are due within 90 days of the application to your federal grant. So at the time, if you're working on that EDA application, be sure to think about the grant program within that 90-day window to apply to the grant program to help try and secure that match funding in support of your EDA grant. That's a quick overview of the grant program. Of course, happy to take more additional questions. I think my contact information will be shared at the end. Feel free to reach out with any questions you have about it. And also feel free to check out that website. A lot of great information there to figure out what you need to do to apply to the grant program.
Thank you, Joseph. So there is a question in the chat, and the question started before, Joseph, before you started speaking about the grant program. So I think this is about the EDA grant. So this is to Emily. Emily, what is the turnaround time? Right? Some things need a 120-day turnaround if possible. There's a lot happening. And so what can you speak to us about what that might look like as far as, you take 60 days to submit the application, you guys take a review period, you're going to let folks know. So from start to finish, about how long might it be before someone could actually start drawing down those funds?
Timelines are hard. Just very, very bluntly. We have been in a slower period at EDA, particularly as we've been going through our disaster funding. We've had a substantial amount of applications come through that pathway that have taken a little bit longer for us to get through our process. We are starting to see things pick up again, though, and we're hopeful. We're starting to see awards being announced and made. I would say on a very conservative and safe bet, to give yourself 6 to 9 months before you need to hear back from EDA from the time that you submit. Again, that depends a lot too on how complete the application is and ready it is to go, and then also where it falls within our process. I will just remind you, we are coming up on the end of the federal year, and that will also impact timelines. So just be cognizant of that as we come into the fall. And then I'll just roll on. We have two kind of gates for clearance. We screen for your eligibility first, and that is kind of a pass-fail. Do you respond to the NOFA? Do you align with one of our investment priorities? We have 5. You have to align with at least one. You do not have to align with all of them, but they are critical infrastructure, workforce, innovation and entrepreneurship, economic recovery, resilience, or manufacturing. Your project does have to hit one of those. And then are your matching funds available and committed to the project? So we need to see that you already have your matching funds in hand. If you have applied to the grant program for them, I'll actually need a letter saying you've been approved to count. So a lot of times we have some ways we can work with you. So this is kind of where I say, hey, call me when you get to that point. But we do need to see your matching funds are available, committed, and unencumbered to the project is the key language there. And then also, like I said, does your project align with your region's comprehensive economic development strategy? The second part of the review is more on merit. So each of these areas are equally important. What's the feasibility of you hitting your schedule? What's the documented support from your regional stakeholders? Do you have any resiliency to future economic shocks in your application? Do you align with other investment in the region? What's the degree of distress in the region? What's your job creation? What's your private investment? We're seeing those very, very key right now. Job creation and private investment both. And then also, how do you align with our current investment priorities?
So, Emily, before we advance, and I can't remember, it might be on a future slide, so forgive me if it is, but I do want to come back to that job creation and retention. When we start talking about partners and stakeholders, one thing that is a little different in my experience when I've worked on EDA grants is that you do have to have your employers actively engaged in this grant writing process. There are actual forms that the employers and stakeholders would have to complete and sign off on. It's more than just a letter of support, right? We love those I love you letters, but this is a little more. This is a little deeper. And so the employer commitment is very tangible in this application. And I appreciate that and completely understand it. But the little support not to say support letters are not important and helpful and valuable. This is a little different than that. And I think that when we start getting those employers engaged, that's where we can start showing that private investment is being leveraged. And so, I just wanted to, my experience, that's a little different in some federal opportunities that we apply for.
Exactly right. We have a form. It's an ED 900B, B for beneficiary, that the industries, it's our gold standard. We like to get that form for any industry that is saying they're going to create jobs or invest private investment in the area. We can take letters, but they do have to be letters of commitment, not letters of support as far as it goes to documenting those jobs and private investment. So we like to see things with real numbers in it, not just we will retain, but how many jobs are really at risk? How many jobs are we retaining? How many jobs are we creating? And what's the dollar amount with the private investment? Private investment can be a lot of different things. So it can be the expansion that the company is doing themselves on their own building. If they are having to train any of their workforce, it can be their cost in training their workforce. If they are having to buy equipment, it can be that. There are some flexibilities there as well. So we want to talk through that as you develop your application to make sure that we're documenting everything that we can.
Now, one thing you mentioned is retention of jobs, right? And so sometimes we think about job creation, but sometimes we just need to stabilize our local economy. So speak a little bit more to us about how retention of jobs also works.
Absolutely. So if you have an industry that says we need, this is just an easy example, we need a larger sewer capacity or we're going to have to shut down here, you can come in and apply to EDA and use that job retention. But for this EDA investment, we're going to lose these jobs. Now, it does have to be documented. The company does have to sign and say, yes, we plan to leave if we don't get this fixed. But you can use that as a mechanism for us.
Okay, so President Stivers would like to ask a few questions, if that's
Absolutely.
okay, because I think he has to jump off the call here in a moment. So please go ahead, President Stivers.
Thanks. I want to get back into a couple of scenarios. One, does it matter that you already have federal funding involved in a project? And I'll give you a for instance. Let's go to Letcher County. Missy Matthews and their foundation is putting together a lot of things up there related to archery, shooting, golf course, cabins, adventure tourism. But she's already received a substantial amount of federal dollars, but she also got some state dollars that could be used, and it's there. Is that something that because she's already got federal dollars in the project, she may be disqualified?
It depends on where the federal dollars come from
Ah,
and what the project she's applying for is. So if they're Appalachian Regional Commission funds, we play well with them, and they're okay. If they're Delta Regional Authority funds for the other side of the state, we play well with them. They're okay. If it's other than that, we probably can't get involved with it. But if there's a piece of the project that could be carved out into a smaller project, quote unquote, for EDA, that doesn't have the other federal pieces touching it, then possibly it's something we could definitely talk through.
and it's multifaceted. I think the bulk of it's probably more of an AMLR grant.
Gotcha.
Uh, um,
Unfortunately, the AMLR doesn't, our legal has said that we can't do that for our match, which
well,
is,
but no, we would use state funds as a match.
yeah, state funds will work all day.
Yeah, but AMLR is also part of the capital stack.
Gotcha.
So that,
So we would need to look at how we can divvy out that project, like parcel out. Is there one facet that EDA could look at that maybe AMLR's not touching?
okay,
And that's what I was going to say, President Stivers, is I've worked on projects and what PBA tells me is has to be encapsulated.
Mhm.
So it doesn't kind of bleed over into the other projects. So if they can just do a single phase with EDA money without having to bleed over into these other projects, they could still access it. Is that correct, Hillary?
Yes.
okay. And the question on speed, there's several things that are happening that we're under NDAs and all that, but um, to have, and I know money is there because we appropriated state general fund monies. Um, so I want to understand if today you had your application complete, you're probably looking at sometime this spring before you get an answer.
I would say that's a conservative estimate, yes.
Okay, then my last question before I jump off, and I'm sorry. What about a multi-state? I know Scott Sharp's on here. There's been some discussion in a central app or Central Appalachia application for a multi-state, multi-county project. Let's just say West Virginia and Kentucky. Um, does the fact that you bring another state into play strengthen your um, application?
I think it can. West Virginia, as an example, is a really fun one because you're also bridging EDA districts as well. So you'd be bringing in the Atlanta region and the Philadelphia region, which I think for us we would just want. We've done that before in other regions and other states. I think we would just want to know which state and community would be the lead applicant on that, and make sure that that's clearly identified so that we would know which pathway to run it through. But as far as strength of application, absolutely partnerships are stronger.
Okay. All right. I'm sorry, but I got to jump off on another Zoom call. Thank you all.
Thank you. All right. Looking at kind of some other things that make your application strong in that same vein, we do want to know about your regional strategy document. We mentioned it several times, your comprehensive economic development strategy or your CEDS. We want to know that your match is available. Again, it's available, committed, and unencumbered. We need to show the proof of distress. So, any kind of third-party data on your unemployment, your per capita, or that coal impact or other special need. Um, our disaster funding does also follow under this proof of distress. This is where you would also say, hey, yeah, we've been hit by a federal disaster. Um, any kind of letters of support that you can include in your application, but let me give the caveat that please do not use the same letter from 5 people to document your support. I know it's a lot easier to send that template letter out, but if you can change that template even just a little bit, it goes a lot further. When I get applications that have the same letter of support, it just doesn't hit as hard. I'm just going to be honest with you. Um, and then give us realistic estimates on your jobs created, retained, how many people are going to be trained through your workforce programs, any private investment that you're leveraging. And then also, how is this program going to stay on? How is it going to make progress? How's it going to be sustainable? How does it fit into nearby public investments?
Emily, another thing that I remember that's a little unique about EDA is that if you are working on construction or renovation, as part of the application, you have to include what you guys call a preliminary engineering report. And that PER has to be completed by by an expert. It has to be an architect or an engineer to do that. Now, some cities or counties, they may have one on staff, but some folks don't. And so we encourage folks to understand that they may have to engage and in some cases even pay for some of that work up front to be able to give a competitive application or put in a competitive application. So can you speak to us a little bit about that?
Absolutely. And I'm going to start by saying procure early on your professional services. So we do require for construction a preliminary engineering report that needs to be done by someone who is capable of filling it out, preferably an engineer or architect. That being said, if you have an engineer or architect fill that out and they have not been properly procured through federal guidelines, which is 2 CFR 200, then they are no longer eligible to be a fundable expense through your grant. That doesn't mean you can't use them. It just means your grant's not going to pay for it. So if you procure them and then they fill out that preliminary engineering report, you're good. We also require an environmental narrative with any construction grant. And that's basically a quick review on, is this project going to have any kind of environmental impacts to your area? So both of those are things to be aware of. But yes, please procure and procure properly before you engage with your professional services.
And that's important because sometimes folks want to do it as a favor, right?
Right.
And if they do that, then they've kind of precluded themselves from being able to actually bid and work on the actual engineering of the project. So, but they can do it as long as, like you say, they actually go through kind of a procurement bid process. So thank you for that clarification. So I think this is my slide. What we wanted to also bring about is that there are some barriers that we need to kind of think about that happen with these EDA projects. And we wanted to help you kind of think through some of those workarounds. One, for example, is, we talked about that form that you have to fill out to be able to show that employers are engaged. But sometimes folks will say, but you know what? I don't have a Toyota. I'm over here in Hazard, as an example, and I don't have a Toyota. I don't have a Ford. I don't have a large manufacturing place. So how am I going to be able to be competitive, because I'm not going to be able to show a large number of jobs either coming in or being retained? And so we suggest that you take a look around at the sector that is emerging in your community. It doesn't have to be a single large factory or employer, but is there a sector that is developing? And it could be a several smaller employers, or maybe it's not even that. Maybe you want to do a downtown revitalization to establish a small business ecosystem instead of having one large factory or one large employer. So again, don't think that if you don't have a large Toyota, well, this opportunity is not for me. There are ways to kind of work around that. Also, you need to take a look at, this match. Now, we just said that there is the grant program, but let's say the grant program, those funds become encumbered, and you still want to be able to apply for this funding. You can go through and minimize your match by being able to document a special need and distress and persistent poverty, which Emily's already talked about. So once again, if you say, oh, well, the grant program is encumbered and so I can't do this, well, maybe there's a way that you can reduce that match to be able to get there. So, and then also don't forget that there are a variety of federal data tools that you can use to document your distress. Sometimes we say, oh, it's kind of hard. We know, but it's hard to document. Well, we've listed here that you've got census and you've got the Bureau of Labor Statistics and Stats America, and the new tool that EDA has recently funded is Nerdy. And so you want to make sure that you are accessing Nerdy as well as some of these other things to be able to build that distress. And maybe you need to build it and do the feasibility study. So you might need to start with a planning grant. Maybe we don't start and lead in with implementation. Maybe you build your feasibility study with a planning grant. So we want to think about that. And then that's the same thing for the construction. If you're not ready for construction or you don't have all the ducks in a row, maybe that EDA planning grant will help you get your feasibility study and your other ducks in a row so that you will be very competitive for implementation. So just wanted to help you try to think through some of those. And then, I think Emily earlier on, she gave some examples of what this project can fund, but let's think about what can we do? Live in southeastern Kentucky, a very small town with a downtown that is in the process of revitalization, but surely needs some more work. So if you live in a small rural community, maybe downtown revitalization and small business support is something. Maybe you need to look at outdoor recreation and tourism as an industry that you can bring in or attract more folks, because that's contributes to economic development. Just ask Gatlinburg. So we know that tourism and recreation has something to play in that. We know that there's been a lot of work and discussions about remote workers, but maybe there's something there to attract remote workers. There has been funding that has been given for this. It's not completely saturated. There's still more folks that can work from home. I technically work from home unless I'm on the road across the state of Kentucky. And so there are certainly people all around that are remote workers. How are we repurposing our former mine lands? There's some really good work that's happening here in flood recovery, that they're building housing, and the carpenters and the electricians and the HVAC folks that have been needed to contribute to this incredible uptick in housing is tangible, and it can be documented. And again, infrastructure investment, we know all about the water, the sewer, and the broadband. But then let's say you've got an employer who is interested, or an industry or a sector that is interested. Do you have the employees that are ready to go to work? Maybe there is some workforce training that needs to be put together, maybe to build up the workforce so that when these folks locate, they don't, well, we can't find enough workers. So we need to be actively engaged in training. So those are just some thoughts around that, but also there is a BRIC economic diversification toolkit that you can access that can kind of step you through and talk you through some of those things. So once again, there's been a lot of resources provided by EDA, and we want to make sure, I think we would be amiss if we submitted an application and we did not reference the resources that EDA is providing to us. So let's make sure to include those. And Eleanor, I think that we have our last poll. So here's the big question. Do you think they're going to apply? So let us know, do you think that if you're going to apply? And it's okay if you're not sure yet, right? Because that's the purpose of the webinar, is to help folks kind of think through and think through, well, maybe this is for me, and I didn't think it was. And now after I've listened to Emily, she's convinced me that I can apply. So that is okay. And it looks like right now it's kind of dead even with yes and not sure. So we completely understand that. And that's okay. So thank you. Right. And I think that here kind of towards the end, we are just trying to figure out, make sure you're ready, right? And so you have to be, I think most folks on the call will know, but I would be amiss if I didn't say, you need to make sure that you have your SAM registration current. You need to make sure that you have an account on EDA's portal. And you need to make sure you've found the SEDS plan. Almost always it's digitally available on the Area Development District's website, but you can always email somebody if you're having difficulty with that. You want to make sure that you have truly documented the distress in your community. Notice it's within 15 years if it's a cold closure year. So it's not just what's happened in the last 12 months. And then we've already talked about, as far as the cash match commitment, take care of that quickly, because once again, the grant program has changed a little bit. You only have 90 days now. Previously, we had a 12-month look back period or look forward period, and now you've got 90 days. And so let's make sure that we get those grant match program applications in as quickly as we can. And if you can't use it, so I think there's some people from higher education on here. Unfortunately, the grant match program doesn't apply to them. So you guys have other methods of bringing cash to the table, and you just need to make sure that you can commit to that in writing, that that's secured and unencumbered. And then Emily, I threw you under the bus, and I gave them your email address and your telephone number to be able to share out if anybody has any questions.
I will just say, don't be thrown off by the DC phone number. I'm trying to get a Kentucky number, but right now it's DC. I apologize. I am in Kentucky.
It's funny, Bertha Parton, a long time ago, she had a 404 telephone number. It said she was in Atlanta. And I probably worked with her for a year before I figured out that she was like 40 minutes down the road in Redbird. So yeah, thank you for that. Okay, there are some things you're going to get in the slides. There are some links that you're going to get. We can help you through this process. We have some grant professionals that stand ready with EDA experience, and we can either help you write or we can help you review. But these resources here, you will get links to those. And I think earlier on, Hannah or Eleanor shared our resource that is on our website. And it has links to all of these documents as well as an early start on the 24-month unemployment rates and per capita income against the national averages for every Kentucky county. So that is a snapshot in time, right? So it's today. So if you're not going to work on this for 6 months, you may have to go out and update your numbers. But we do have that resource available for you today. And we think that that will be helpful, at least giving you a head start. Of course, we want you to confirm all that before you submit it. And at this point, I have back and looking. Someone asks, do you have to have a coal closure within the past 15 years?
So you have to, if you're planning to apply for the Assistance to Coal Communities funding, you have to have some kind of impacting event in the past 15 years. But for EDA funding in general, no. But yes, if it's the Assistance to Coal Communities. So if you're just applying for public works or economic adjustment assistance, then no. If you want the special need category for coal, then yes, you would need that 15 years back documentation.
And then I think someone also asked, Tammy and I answered this to you, but just to make sure everyone saw that, this is kind of directed to Joseph's area in the cabinet. It says, if we do not hear anything back from the grant program, who do we need to reach out to see whether or not we were approved or denied? And Joseph, I threw you under the bus on that one and said that that everybody needs to contact you. And so I have provided your email address in the chat. If you have questions about your application, or if you just need to see whether or not you have any questions about the application in general. The match can be a little persnickety if you've got multiple counties. So sometimes you might need some help with that. We can help you. Please call us first, but you can also call Joseph and he can help you as well.
Absolutely.
Questions? Any other questions? There's been folks dropping resources in the Slack or in the chat. Please grab those resources, those links, and bookmark those so that you can have them going forward. Some of those are in the solicitation, but sometimes it's nice to just have them saved in your favorites.
Emily,
Questions?
can I clarify one thing? So if I'm in a county or a census tract that doesn't have a coal impact event, and I'm not going after the ACC pathway, I'm going after either public works or the broader economic adjustment assistance pathway, I'm not going to be looking at coal closures for eligibility for that. I will instead be looking at that rolling 24-month unemployment and per capita income as compared to national averages. Is that right?
Correct. 100% correct.
Okay, great. I find that kind of confusing when, because there's a couple of different pathways and things. So I just want to clarify for folks that if you don't qualify necessarily for the Assistance to Coal Communities, that doesn't mean you're out of this opportunity altogether. And we've provided in the chat that link to a resource which will help you quickly, from a planning perspective, look at your county compared to national averages to help determine your level of distress.
Really appreciate that. Do we have any other questions? When I work on the narrative, and Emily, tell me if I'm spinning my wheels and maybe I'm including things I shouldn't, but I will also go ahead and include more things about my community that proves up the stress. Low educational attainment, free and reduced lunch, there's other numbers, opportunity zones, persistent poverty statuses, Are those helpful? Should we dig a little deeper and provide more than just unemployment and median income, or are we spinning our wheels?
They are helpful if they relate to your project. So if you can talk about how this specific, in addition to the standard ones, is going to be impacted by whatever you're applying for, that's very helpful. If you're just throwing me data to throw me data, save your breath.
Okay, so for instance, opportunity zones, because that's to attract business and industry
Correct.
to,
Yep.
underserved areas. Then I might want to talk about that if my project is to attract an employer to the area.
Yes. And I would say almost always, if you have an opportunity zone, you should be mentioning it. But your example there is spot on as well. So anything that you're doing that could impact the data point that you're telling me.
So we have another question. So we can partner with a for-profit to provide workforce development or something similar. Yeah.
So we cannot serve as a direct pass-through to a private company or fund a private company. But that's not to say there couldn't be some workforce training done. That's something that I would want to talk to you about very specifically, project by project. But just in general, EDA can't be a pass-through. So we can't make an award to you that you then turn around and immediately give completely to the private industry, nor can we fund private industry directly.
If Tammy or this organization that she represents if they were offering the workforce development, that would lead to employees that might work for that for-profit factory, then that might qualify.
Yes.
Other questions? All right. Other question or any other questions in the chat right now at this point? So if we don't have any other questions, I think that we can go ahead and close for today. As a reminder, you will get the slides and you will get a recording. Eleanor will be sending that out. And again, there's a variety of resources that you can click on and that you will find helpful. And so, Emily, thank you so much for joining us. And Joseph with the cabinet, thank you so much for joining us and helping us know a little bit more about the grant program and the changes and how that's going to support this EDA opportunity. And I hope that folks have found this very helpful. Eleanor will be sending out a survey to you when she sends out the link to you tomorrow. And we would be very grateful if you could complete that survey and let us know if you found this helpful and beneficial. And we'll make sure that we do more and more and more.
Thanks, everyone.